Hi, my name is Simone, and today we're going to be talking about measures of center. So that's mean, median, and mode. And I want to start by asking the question, what is a measure of center? And for what we're talking about today, a measure of center is going to be looking at a representative value for a particular set of data. So instead of having a whole collection of the data, we're looking for one value that can sort of give us an idea of what that data is talking about. And we're going to do this by looking at an example. And so what I've done is I've taken 12 different brands of vanilla yogurt, and on the right, I have their different calorie counts. And we might ask if we can find a value that sort of represents this data in some way. And why might it be helpful to have a representative value? If we were looking at making an app that helps people track their calorie intake, or if we were testing recipes and we wanted to be able to give a somewhat accurate recipe, like calories per serving for a recipe involving vanilla yogurt, we might want a representative value. So our first value is mean, which is the numerical average. So how to calculate this is we add up the values and then divide by the number of items we added up. So in our example, we have 12 values, and if we sum up all of the calories, we end up with 1910. And that's the total sum of all 12 values. And because there were 12 of them, we then divide by 12 and get 159.166666. And rounding to the nearest calorie, that gives us a mean value of 159. Our next value is median, and median is the middle value. So what we do is we order the list from smallest to largest, and we're looking for what value is right in the middle. And usually when I'm doing this, I like to actually start on the outside and work my way in to make sure I get right in the middle. And so we'll do that with the highlighted values. And it turns out we actually have two values in the middle. And when that happens, if you have an even number of things in your data set, we're going to take the average of those two middle values. And here for our vanilla yogurt, we end up with a median value of 165. Our last measure of center that we're looking at today is mode, which is the most common value. So here we're looking at the value that appears most often in the data. So in our vanilla yogurt example, there's one value that appears twice, and that's 120. So our mode value is 120. To recap, we looked at 12 different brands of vanilla yogurt, and we calculated a mean of 159, a median of 165, and a mode of 120. And so this is the part where I would ask you, the students, which measure of center you would choose as your representative, and to give a justification for why. I don't have any students here right now, but if I did, I can tell you a little bit of what some students have said. Student made the argument that they would take the mean because they feel like that's sort of the most average, accurate measure. Somebody said they would take the mode because they think that people who are counting calories want to see the smallest number, or the median because it's really right in the middle, so it gives you a sort of middle value. All three are good arguments. And what's nice about this is we sort of see that different measures of center highlight different qualities of the data. So these aren't just things that we calculate for random assortments of vanilla yogurt, but we also see them show up in the news. So student loan debt is something that's been in the news a lot. And usually when we're talking about student loan debt, we're talking about average student loan debt, which is the mean student loan debt. And how they calculate that is they look at all of the student loan debt that we have and then divide by the number of people who owe money. And it shows that the average student loan debt for the class of 2017 is $28,650. We also see median in the news, especially when we're talking about household income. the statistic that we get the most often is the median household income. And so that really just splits right down the middle the household income. So we can say, well, half of all households make less than that and half make more. And that is the data that we get through the census. That's the easiest way to measure the median, the measure the center of household income. Our last measure we often see when we're looking at qualitative demographic data. So if you're looking at something like race or gender that is not something that has a numerical value that you can add up and take the numerical average of, you can still sort of calculate a measure of center by looking at what's most common. So in this Washington Post article talking about the average American, they say the average American is a woman, and how they're getting that average value is by looking at the most common gender that was chosen by survey participants. And so we also should note that the word average can be used for any of these measures of center in terms of like colloquial English usage. And so we really want to pay attention to which measure of center we're talking about. And if they say average, you can't assume that it's going to be the mean. Another thing that we can note is that in this article, right, it's saying that they're using the most common age of white women, which is the demographic they already had. And then they compare that and say, well, actually the median age is 37.7, even though the average that they're looking at is 52. So again, it's really important to sort of pay attention to which measure of center is being used, because it gives you very different information. If we're looking at the median age for the whole country, half of the country is younger than 37.7 years old. And so that gives us different information. So just to recap, we talked about mean, which is the numerical average. Median gives us the middle value of a data, and mode gives us the value that appears most often, the most common value. I hope that this little recording has helped you see that different measures highlight different qualities, and that it's really important to pay attention to what measures are being used, because it'll help us think critically about what information we're getting and what information we might not be getting. Thanks for listening.